a different character, but he was our brother.
What do you mean by that?
He was just very introverted. He didn't have a lot of friends. I don't know how to explain it. He just wasn't very much like us. But he just lived his own life, and we weren't involved with him. But we weren't involved with each other very much at all either. So it's like, it was what was it on the outside. It wasn't, we didn't really connect internally. So,
okay.
I don't know.
And then how would you assess your personality?
I like to think I'm a loyal person. I'm a caring person. I always like to believe the best in people. I almost to I don't want to say a fault, because I think everybody deserves a friend in this world, but I can be very introverted at times. But I like to have who my friends are. I passionately love them, and I would be there for them. But I like to consider myself kind of where I stand in the middle, where I like to evaluate everything from the outside. But I like to stay out of a lot of drama.
Okay. So we keep kind of touching around the outsides of the drama, but would you say on a scale of 1 to 10 that your family pre-2018 was 1 being very boring, not dramatic, 10 being as dramatic as it gets? What number would you give it?
It's hard to say, because that was our normal. I think there was always something going on in everybody's life. I tried to, all of this, I was just trying to get married and fall in love with the man that I wanted to marry. And my world got turned upside down. And I was just very much one of those, like, everybody else's problems are their own and I can't fix it. But it was tough. It's really hard to explain, but everybody had trauma and trouble and issues.
You use the past tense when you're talking about your siblings. Why is that?
We don't talk anymore.
They don't talk to you.
Communication is a two-way street.
So when's the last time you talked to your siblings?
Had to be probably end of 2019.
Okay. Now why do you believe that is?
This had something to do with it, but we had our own falling outs individually that I kind of refreshed my memory when I knew this was all happening, and reading through text messages and things like that. But Chris and I had a falling out a year prior. My husband and I always go to Lake Lanier Islands for the 4th of July. My husband grew up in that area and worked there for a very long time.
At Lake Lanier Islands?
At Lake Lanier Islands. So that was our tradition. We did it every year, ever since I knew him.
This would be the big beach at Lake Lanier?
Yeah, like what's now Margaritaville.
Okay. And we're going to talk about the 4th in 2018 in a minute.
This is
what you guys did every year.
Yeah, but I'm talking about 2017.
Okay.
So we invited Chris and Jenna and the girls to come up with us to celebrate the 4th of July. And it ended up where we had spent the entire day out there, and they were drinking heavily. And we went to the Mexican restaurant on Friendship Road, and I pulled the girls in the bathroom, and I was like, listen, I can't let you drive with them. I was like, it's not safe. So they agreed, and we got in the car, and we took them back, as they were staying at Lake Lanier Islands Resort that night, and took them back. And shortly after that, I called my parents. Not that night, could have been a couple of days, I don't remember. But I told them, I said, Chris has a problem. He has a drinking problem, and those girls are going to get in an accident, and something bad's going to happen to them or somebody else. Well, it wasn't too long after that my brother decided to call my parents, and specifically my father, and say that he was having an affair with my mother, and accused. And that was pretty much from then on out. I'd never felt the same about Chris.
And so that was right around the 4th of July 2017.
Correct.
Was this also the time, were you aware of him threatening to kill your mother.
That happened after.
Okay.
I kind of pieced it all together because I hear bits from people, but nobody tells me directly. Honestly, when that happened, I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to be involved. I thought that was something that my parents should handle. They were the parents, they needed to handle it, and that's why I went to them about his problem, and because it wasn't my place to tell him he had a problem, and it was theirs as his parents. And I don't know if that was a result of that.
Did you know that it had almost a similar situation about Chris trying to leave with the girls, intoxicated? Did you know about that? I slightly recall something of the sorts. I just remember telling my parents that the girls should not be driving with them if they were going to be drinking like that. And it was if it came to the point of me saying something to my parents, there was a reason. I did not feel like they were safe. And so let's be clear. At that point, Chris, instead of stopping drinking or taking accountability for his actions, he decided to say that your fiance was having an affair with your mother.
That's what I can assume.
Okay.
Because there's no other reason for him. My husband was good friends with Scott and Chris before this. They went to an SEC football championship game together. Chad and my dad had a fantastic relationship before all of this happened. We went out there almost every weekend to have dinner with them. And we were there on his birthday on June 27th before he died. And we were the only ones there.
And we are going to talk about that weekend. So I want to back up too. So that's you brought up Chris and you brought up that incident, and we may just have to talk about moments in time that come back, because I understand that what you're currently going through in this moment is awful.
Yes.
And this is a very patient jury, and so we will get through it. Okay.
Okay.
But let's go back and let's talk about Scott. I want to talk about, he gets back from Iraq. Can you tell me about any specific instances you remember? You mentioned anger and things like that. Can you talk about that for the jury?
He was just very protective over the farm, and I never understood why we called it a farm, because it was a glorified petting zoo at most. But sorry,
they know they've seen it.
Sorry, we had a lot of animals growing up, and this was like that on steroids. It made no sense.
Well, then how did we wind up there? How did the family get to the farm?
That would be a great question. Ask my daddy. Because I don't know. There was a lot of things that happened before that moment that I think should have been taken care of before just putting money on it to fix it. Okay. I think a lot of things that have happened in our family get swept under the rug, and they're never addressed, and they're not taken seriously. But a sin is a sin, and I feel like this is a repercussion of all the sins that were committed over years, unfortunately.
This is sins by everybody in the family?
Everybody. False money idols. It was always what it looked like on the outside. It never mattered what it was on the inside. There was many things growing up, like our parents didn't really, they cared, but you had to figure it out for yourself. It wasn't, let me walk you through this, let me show you how to do this. I don't feel like it was ever that moment. So we kind of had to fend for ourselves a little bit in that aspect.
Okay. Well, let's talk. Let's just go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about your mother. Let's talk about it. Growing up. It seems like, the jury's seen messages between you guys. It seemed like you guys were pretty close.
She was my mom, yeah.
All right.
She is my mom.
Right.
I've always cherished we had a great family growing up. It seemed like everything was normal. We lived in a great house, and Alfreda went to a good school, had never wanted for anything, or never needed for anything, I guess I should say. We were given everything. My dad provided everything.
Let's talk about your dad, and I'm bouncing now too. What was your dad like?
He was great.
Take your time. I feel like we've been in this trial for a while.
He was a very smart man. very, I'm sorry. There was no doubt in my mind he loved all of us. He made that known, and he was very sarcastic.
Lawyers are notorious for that.
He had the lawyer personality for sure, but I mean, he was the dad that you walk down the stairs and he'd whistle and go, "You're a movie star." Or when Emily had her baby, he texted me a picture of me holding Olivia, and he goes, "You're natural." Like, he was just so loving, and I can still.
Take your time.
He was just such a big man, and he'd come and he'd just wrap his arms around you. But then in this sense, he'd turn around and fart on you, and you'd just be like, like, he was sweet, and but he was witty. He could say things that cut you to the bone. He definitely demanded respect in that aspect, I guess you would say. I was always fearful of him in the sense that I wanted to respect him, and I wanted him to be proud of me. And when he would make comments that I was not doing as well as I should, I took that to heart, and I really wanted to make him proud. He was a good dad. He was a good grandfather, and I wish my son could have seen that.
Could you tell the jury what his relationship was like with Chris, for example?
I mean, I never saw them really do much together, I guess you would say, but I mean, Chris was grown. I don't know much about their relationship when they were younger. I don't really recall. I know that they were in a lot of fights over the past years about money.
Could you explain that to the jury? Best you can remember.
The best I can remember. I mean, it sounds awful, but I mean, he had issues with taking money, and he expected. He always had his hand out, but I don't doubt that he didn't love my daddy. I approach things differently than my siblings did.
What does that mean?
Meaning I never wanted anything in return for his love. I just, especially right before he died, I just wanted a mother and a father, and that was it. I didn't want any more of the drama. I didn't want any more of their marital problems. I didn't want to deal with any of it. I just wanted a mom and a dad, and I wanted to get married, and I wanted them to watch my kids grow up.
Okay. So, tell me if I'm wrong, but what I think I heard in regards to Chris was he didn't have a very close relationship with your dad that you noticed. That I noticed.
I mean, it was all about the same. I mean, they'd have conversations at Christmas, but I don't know if he ever went out and like had dinner with him. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't see it. They may have, but like my dad and I would meet up, and because I lived in Roswell, Buckhead area, and he would call me and he'd be like, "Hey, I'm leaving the office. You want to go meet at Cheesecake Factory?" And I'd say, "Yeah, let's go." And it would be just him and I. And so I don't know if they had that or not. I really don't.
Know. But you did know. And how did you know that he was stealing money from your dad?
Well, my mother made it very apparent. There was never any dirty laundry that the both of them weren't willing to air out to all of their children.
So
there was no
dad
boundary.
Would do that too.
Yeah, yeah.
So he would say, "Chris is stealing from me."
Correct.
Okay. And was that in the months and weeks leading up to his death?
Years.
For years?
It's been a problem for as long as as the girls have been around, as far as I'm concerned.
How would your brother do it? You say steal from him. How would that happen?
It was all things that I was told, whether it be my mom, mostly my mom, because I don't think my dad really liked to talk about those problems. He liked to complain to me about my mother. But I mean, it was well known that he would take checks and he would cash them. He would take credit card numbers and he would use the numbers off of them always needing stuff for the girls. I don't just always had his hand out. I don't know how else to say it.
But Emily didn't do stuff like that, right?
She needed help from him. I think it was mostly for her husband. I know that she moved into our house in Thompson Station, and she would have not gotten that without him. He co-signed